All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, especially right after lunch. We are going to try to make this fun, a little bit of interactive. We'll have some polls and some questions for you all, and definitely open up for Q&A at the end. I know folks are trickling in, so we're going to keep the door open for a little while longer as we fill up. But welcome, I'm really excited for this conversation. I am really excited for my panelists, and to have an interesting conversation about what are the trends that are shaping customizable portions. And we'll talk a little bit more about what customizable portions really means, but also we're going to dig into some really interesting research that shows what a huge opportunity this is for the restaurant and food service industry. I'm going to welcome my panelists, Abby from the Culinary Institute of America, Jessica from Sodexo, which, shout out, they just hit their food waste reduction goal, over 50%, amazing. And Brian Rowe from Ohio State University, and an amazing researcher in the food waste space. So excited to share the conversation. Before we dig in, we are going to start off with a poll, because today we're going to be talking a lot about trends that are really consumer trends and consumer headwinds and tailwinds that are going to be informing it. So we're all consumers. We all have consumer behaviors. So we want to see what you answer to some of these questions. And for that, I'm going to welcome Erica from our Data and Insights team, who's going to do a quick little Mentimeter poll with us. If you have a cell phone accessible, scan the QR code, and we are going to do, again, quick, I think it's 7 questions for you. Erica.
Yeah, welcome. We're really excited to have you here. As Dana described it earlier, as a work spa. So I'm hoping you've been enjoying the revitalizing food waste spa experience. Yes, great way to start. Please join us at menti.com. And scan the QR code, might be a little bit easier. Give you guys just a sec to join. Our first question is, do you share items or skip ordering items to prevent wasting food? I guess unsurprisingly, given our demographics here, we've got a very large portion.
Slightly biased.
Yes, but it's a good portion to see. All right, see, going on to the next question. Our next question is, what do you believe signals value most to customers today? Our options are larger portions, price, customization, and quality. I got a pretty good split here today between price and quality. As you can see, it's a very nuanced issue. Today we'll be talking a little bit about that.
And for the next one, yep.
And there are no prizes or punishments for getting this question wrong or right, but we wanted to ask, what is the #1 source of food waste in restaurants and food service? Our options are prep waste and trimming, prepared ingredients, expired inventory, and plate waste. People are overwhelmingly selecting plate waste. All right, I guess you guys have been doing your homework. That is actually the correct answer.
Yeah, I know, smart ones in the room. All right, and next.
And then our last question for today is, have you or anyone close to you used a GLP-1 medication for health treatment or weight loss? All right, we've got a pretty even split, slightly more towards yes. I'll hand the mic back over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about the data around GLP-1s and snacking trends today.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you all so much for participating. To set the stage a little bit for this conversation, what we're going to be talking about today is portions and portion customization. And I want to just first set the level playing field, because I actually come from a background of 18 years in the restaurant industry. And if I talked about portion customization or portion sizes, that's usually like a third rail. Nobody touches it because you really don't want to mess with portions or what could be perceived value. But what we're talking about here is a lot of different things. That's why we call it customization. It can be everything from having a small, medium, large, offering the half portion, making the kids' menu available, to not automatically defaulting to have sides included with meals. There's lots of different things that fit this mold of what portion customization is. So that's what the conversation is going to be about today. It's going to be the broad. It's not just going to be let's shrink all the portions so that we all eat half of what we eat today. Why, just from the context perspective, doesn't matter when it comes to food waste is plate waste, as you all answered very correctly, is that 70% of waste in restaurants is coming from plate waste. It's what's actually going out of the kitchen to the consumer, but then ends up in the trash, whether that's in the front of house or that's at home with the diner. And it's an enormous financial, as well as an operational, environmental, and social impact of that amount of food. We estimate at Refed that if we took on portion customization at scale, we could reduce restaurant waste by 2.3 million tons. It's a massive opportunity for us. And what are those headwinds and tailwinds that we're going to be talking a little bit about today? Some of those is GLP-1 usage. I know earlier today, Michelle cited, approximately 27 to 30% of folks who actually are battling diabetes utilize these drugs, but when we look at the general population, it's about 8 to 10% of the population is utilizing these for disease management, weight loss, and other types of treatments. The second thing is, we haven't talked about much today, kind of this rise of mindful eating. There is a huge wellness trend in the US, as you all know, regardless of your generation. Food is medicine, and the impact that food has on our life is a huge trend, and that is, for us, a tailwind. It's an opportunity for us of folks starting to change their behavior around what they're choosing to consume. Global cuisines, the Culinary Institute talks a lot about this. Huge tapas fan, I will say I love that, and I love sharing meals. The rise of global cuisines is actually introducing different ways of eating, which offers us new opportunities for portions to become normalized. Food costs overall, we know that inflation is not only impacting the consumer and how much I'm paying for my food, but also restaurant operators are paying for each and every ingredient that's coming in the back of house. And snacking. I am a snacker, I admit it. Most Americans right now, the average is 4 to 6 times a day folks are snacking. A lot of folks are actually not even eating 3 full meals a day. I live with teenagers, they snack even more. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's at least 10 times a day. And so these are all opportunities for us to, again, lean in and say, is this the moment? Can we meet the moment where portion options are actually exciting, sexy? There's something that restaurant operators want to lean into, not get us scared away from. There's also always headwinds, right? Operational complexity. It is so hard to change even just one small little thing. Jessica knows that very well. And then I think the other piece is just this value perception that I said around that third rail. And so I think there's just this great opportunity, and this is kind of the impetus for this conversation. And last, before I turn it over to Abby to talk a little bit about it from the restaurant perspective, is that we also know that guest perception overall, the broad consumer, is changing. And so I would be remiss in not sharing just a touch of information, and we'll have some QR codes at the end for some of this research. But Refed and Data Essentials did some consumer research earlier this year. And it was really focused on how are they dining, what do they feel about leftovers, and a couple key points that I just can't not talk about. And one is this feeling of guiltiness. Like, what's one of the biggest motivators for us? It's actually how we make people feel. 61% of diners are saying that they're feeling guilty when they're leaving uneaten food on the plate. What an opportunity for us, right? And I think this last stat on the bottom as well that I would call out, 59% of Gen Pop, it's not just about GLP-1 users, although they are significantly higher. 59% say that they are willing to consider and they are more likely to visit if you are offering flexible portions. It's the name of the game is, can I get a guest to come in more frequently to see me? That is a huge win when it comes to restaurant and food service. So again, just painting the portrait of there is consumer demand for this. It's the moment, and we're really, really excited about that. So with that, I'm going to ask one more audience question and then turn it over to you, Abby. So when we think about this, This is great. The guest is saying they want it, they're excited about it. But is it good for business? Is actually doing this create revenue for consumers or for food businesses?
Great. And what do you all think? True or false? Does it automatically mean reduced revenue? No. Good. So you're all here. This is great. So wonderful. Yeah. And what I would say is, from the operational side of it, there are 3 factors that I think that we'll talk about through this research that impact revenue. And it's customer frequency, as you're saying, if you can get customers coming in more frequently, you become a once-a-week establishment versus once a month. That's good. Efficient resource use, a lot of what we're talking about today. How can we make the most of what we have and not be wasting? And then, of course, improving profit margins. So it doesn't have to mean that a half-size portion is half price. Maybe it's 65% of that price. But if it's the right portion, and 59% of the general population is saying they would visit that if it meets their, another fun fact from that study, which I really recommend you check out, this Data Essential and Refed study, is that nearly half of consumers said that they would pay a little more to get a right-sized portion that fits their appetite. So the appetite is here, right? Maybe this is the right time. So I want to just segue and to what the research I'm representing is from the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. We call it MCURC. And this is a group representing a global network of college universities, allied organizations, research collaborators like Refed, and we really try to advance applied scalable solutions that can make operations and menus healthier and more sustainable. And we do that through research and education and innovation. So this is one of those multi-stakeholder projects. From an operator standpoint, Dana talked about this earlier, the volatility of the industry right now is real. So when we think about conducting research that can help reduce food waste is one of our pillars. We recognize that economic inflation is a huge factor in terms of efficient resource use. Chefs and operators are constantly thinking about how can we make the most of the food that we have, that we're sourcing. Menus and sourcing demands are changing. Consumers are changing, right? They're open and they're trying different flavors and global cuisines out in the world. And then when they're in a university setting, they're open to that too, right? So they may, and some of you who are in non-commercial environments, you have so many outlets that you're operating. It's basically like many different retail operations. Sustainability reporting is increasing, right? You have to report on food waste and the connection to how you are managing your menus and the impact it has on an operation. And this last piece is really important and connects to a project that I'll just touch on at the very end. But how are we engaging the workforce? And chefs love to be creative. They are creatives, right? And so if you give parameters in which to work with and work with us in research, it can really inspire change and also gain buy-in. So the project that I'm going to mainly talk about today is customizable portions. And this was a look at reducing plate waste and really taking an effort through these multi-stakeholder, all these multiple stakeholders to work together to say, how do we investigate it? And why is it a barrier? If everyone's so focused on back of house waste, which we uncovered, why is it hard to measure plate waste? And what are the opportunities there not to necessarily reduce portion sizes, and that's that shrinkflation, maybe misnomer here. We're talking more about how portions can be a way in to meet consumer demand and also create this like virtuous feedback loop here, right? So why portions? From an operational standpoint, by looking at plate waste and investigating where there are opportunities to offer more portion customization or to offer, options, then, it's giving feedback to the back of house. And you have to do that by measuring. So clearly, you have to measure plate waste. And we have some resources at the end on how you can do that. But I think that by measuring plate waste at the front, it gives all these signals and information to the back, right? Which allow you to improve your profit margin, allow you to reduce inventory waste, all sorts of things. So that is the why of portions. What was the project? High level, we listened to experts in the field in both commercial settings and non-commercial environments through interviews and surveys. There was an analysis of menus across top chains to understand better who's offering portion options and how and why and where. And then there was students from Georgetown School of Business and the Earth Commons conducted 4 waste audits in the District of Columbia metro area, and then did some operational impact modeling of that data. They did not use the great food waste technology that we would say that makes it more efficient. So they actually did like hands-on waste audits. And so high-level key findings from the menu analysis: 43% of chains are offering some customization or reduced portion options, but there are limited adult portion options, right? A lot of that is in kid menus. So one thing to think of here is you don't necessarily need to, if you're in a food operation or you work with them, change things on the menu. It could just be a reframe, and not calling that a kids menu, but calling it a value menu or a snacking menu, right? And the build your own plates, like, wouldn't it be great if there were opportunities to choose to have a side or not, or to have fruit salad alongside your breakfast plate, which is relevant here. And so, yeah, so there's opportunity. The other thing that are not on these slides is that a lot of times people felt in the interviews that their portions were correct. They were like, we got it, there's no room for anything to change. And so they're still just focusing on back of house when there are these opportunities to like reframe portions and create more customization, which meets that consumer interest. So here, what also findings from the actual plate waste audit, which reinforces maybe the connection to the GLP-1s, is that more of the calorie-dense, like richer portions were some of the ones that were wasted the most. So maybe that's an option to have half size of the very favorite indulgent thing. People want a little bit of it and not the whole thing. Or to market it as a share plate. And then starches and sides dominated the waste. And in some cases, it's like 21% plate waste factor, which amounts to a lot of wasted dollars over time. So could you have a smaller amount of fries and say, you can ask for more, right? And serve more or half size, et cetera. And then shockingly, 17% of menu items weren't ordered. And so that's an important reason to also conduct an audit, because if you're bringing inventory in, then you're not being very efficient with the waste. And so I won't get into this graph, but just look at the brown section in these pies. That's all the starch waste. So that's just an example to say if you can even make like one tiny change to a default option, then you're saving thousands of dollars annually, and you're not compromising customer satisfaction. And that's ultimately what we found through this study. Another fun one of small changes making, small like incremental adjustments making changes that can improve profit revenue and appeal to chef creativity is this another study we did with Refed, Repurpose with a Purpose, which is about measuring the impact of chefs using what was available in the kitchen to make something else that was for the menu. So creating a little margin for chef specials, et cetera, in menus that can also reduce waste and help improve profit margin. And here's just a fun example. At UCLA, they took bread that was wasted from sandwich stations, or that otherwise would go to waste, and brought it back to their commissary and used that to make meatballs. So they didn't have to buy breadcrumbs, right? And they're saving thousands of dollars just with that one tiny thing in their operation. So you could imagine at scale that has a big impact. We tracked just with 16 recipes with whatever was on hand, which in some cases was a very small amount they worked with, or something big, and the participants saved collectively $20,000 in food costs in just 1 month of data collection. So this is just an example of how these small changes, one, by measuring it, then you can change it, and just making small adjustments that allow for menu design to reduce waste and appeal to consumers. So the US Food Waste Pact, this is a QR code. I don't know if are we sharing these slides after? Yes. Great. So you can find it after. This is a toolkit for you to conduct your own food waste audit. And this is just a really helpful tool. So if you wanted to conduct research, it could even just be a few days or just a day in a busy service period to see what are we actually wasting, what are the opportunities. And just the last slide here is just reading more about the portions report and then reviewing the broad research within MCURC and some contact information. Again, we can share this after, but I will pass it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Abby. And what we've talked about already is given a quick context setting of kind of where is the consumer and what's that demand that's being generated. We've talked, it seems to be good for business. But I think the kind of open question, especially in the term around GLP-1 use, is kind of like, are GLP-1 users actually wasting more, wasting less? How is their behavior changing? I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, to give us an answer here.
Well, it's not, it's still to be determined definitively. We've had a couple studies, a few breadcrumbs out there, and so I'll share some of those. About 2 years ago, we talked to more than 500 GLP users in 2024 and asked them if they would agree with the following statement: have you wasted more, do you waste more food now that you're on this medication? About 25% agreed, meaning 75% were either no additional waste or maybe actually reducing waste, which is positive. That stimulated us to go to our national tracking survey, which we do go out multiple times a year, talk to consumers, have them articulate and self-report waste in 24 different food categories, get a nice estimate of their household food waste. And we had, back in 22 and 23, we had assessed their BMI. And so we had an idea, and we found that those who have BMI over 30, so classically, many studies can define them as obese, we're wasting about 40% more food than people of a standard or normal weight, BMI under 25. We then, in the past year or so, we've been tracking GLP use among those people answering our survey. And there we find GLP users are about 26% higher self-reported food waste than non-GLP users. So not as extreme as, so we'd expect GLP users to probably still be in those higher BMI ranges. And so it's not clear exactly from the data that we have so far. What we really need is to, and I've tried to do this, haven't had success yet, is to pair with one of those RCTs where they're actually testing the medication, have somebody on a placebo, have somebody on the actual medication, and then add on questions such as food purchasing, food waste, and things like that. So that's the type of study we would need to really definitively answer this. But we're getting mixed signals here, so we really need to track this down and figure it out.
What behaviors around GLP-1, anything that you would hypothesize is leading to that increase in waste? Is it simply that they're buying the same portion size and consuming less, or anything that you would just...
Again, a few...
I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, a few breadcrumbs here. From the group that answered, the only GLP users, when they answered, they tend to be more agreed that they waste more food when they are suffering nausea and other side effects that are pretty typical along with these items. And in that group, they seem to be more in agreement that they're wasting food early on in their GLP journey, if you would say, although we didn't see that pattern in the tracking survey. So again, a lot of mixed messages here. Those who are on GLPs who also embraced a more vegetable-heavy diet were also wasting less as well. So it seems like if they are aligning to a more vegetable-heavy diet, it seems like maybe they're just eating through their inventories rather than... but again, a lot of work yet to be done to connect these dots, but some very intriguing breadcrumbs here.
I always vote for eating more vegetables. That's a good thing. And we know that produce in particular is the #1 wasted item overall.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting trend to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Jessica, we've talked a lot about hypotheticals and research. You're in it. You're doing this work day in, day out on food waste. What are you seeing within your own operation? Like, what are you thinking about portion sizes and plate waste overall at Sodexo?
Yeah, so we've framed up a lot of the tailwinds, and to me, these are all great things because these are disruptors, and I think that is something that we're kind of all seeking right now in the food system. We need some disruptors to make the change, to get to the future that we want to see when it comes to reducing food waste, and particularly when it comes to GLP-1s, because the movement is happening not just on the consumer side, but the servers are reacting to it. The food service workers are reacting to it. So they're actually looking to implement new ways to serve food to meet this consumer demand, or at least what they perceive as consumer demand, maybe not based on having full data yet. So I think it is a disruptor already. And so what we're seeing a lot of the activities that you described that are successful, when it comes to food service workers and reducing food waste, it takes all of these things. All of the interventions can have some impact. It's like dieting. Everything works if you stick with it, right? So I think that it's the same thing with these interventions. Not only can we look at changing portion sizes, but it's important to remember that we need to make sure we're offering the same amount of choice, because people hate it when you take away their choices, or even a perception that something is taken away from them. But if you give them the option, if you have your small, medium, large portion sizes, they can still choose the same size that they always had if that's what they want, or they can choose something different. And so I think it's the way that we're implementing these interventions that is going to make it stick and be perceived as a value, not something that's been taken away. And to do that, we have to do the right training for the food service workers. So one of the things, for example, when you think about changing portion sizes is that you have to retrain how you're going to plate it. Maybe you have different plate sizes, maybe you have different serviceware to make sure that those right portions are getting there, and that people aren't over portioning, because that might just be something that they were used to when you only had the one size to choose from. So that type of training has to go along with it. And also making sure that you're not offering a lower portion size or lower calorie size plate, but then at the end of the service line, you ask the customer, oh, would you like something else with that, to add on? But instead it's the reverse, that you give people the option to choose the sides that they want, rather than you presenting it to them. So it's connecting these interventions with the right training for the food service workers that I think can make it much more impactful and last a lot longer. But regardless of if a consumer is on GLP-1s or not, they still want the food to be delicious, right? It's just a different maybe size that they want or how much they're going to eat. And as you mentioned, there is this GLP-1 journey. So what a person might want at the beginning of their usage is going to change over time. So we're not, just going to throw out all the old ways and have all these new ways, but we still have to have all the options on the table. But to me, it's a huge disruptor in that we're actually seeing our operators react to this and make the change, because they're seeing it come through the door already. And we just need to make sure that we're packaging those things in the right way to make them last.
And for you, I know that as we were prepping for this, you had brought up that maybe the drivers and the demand for these choices is a little bit different depending on, you operate in a lot of different segments and at different types of facilities. Are you seeing this trend even, for example, in a university setting where maybe it's snacking that's actually driving it versus maybe GLP? Are you seeing differences across different segments that you serve?
So, I can't say definitively, but within these different segments that we serve, we have different types of service. So if you think about the traditional buffet or all you could eat that you might see on a college campus, if those consumers are starting to eat less, that's going to be highly evident. You'll be able to measure that because somebody has to take that food off the line, and they'll be able to see that impact right away. So that is that will be an early indicator of whether or not they need to serve the same amount of food the following week. And then similarly with plate waste, if we're actually serving on a takeaway plate, and that food is being thrown in the trash, then if we're not measuring it, then we have no idea if we're seeing those impacts or not. So it's less about the specific industry, but more the type of service that will help us be able to identify early what those trends are, and be able to make the right interventions depending on that type of service.
And Abby, what are you seeing across MCURC establishments? Any other trends that you would note?
I think that, that are related to customization. I think that, people are still interested in taking a variety of things, right? So they want the many options, and they might be taking a smaller amount. But I think that as you're saying, the many options that they're given, especially in their freshman year, we consistently hear that people end up their plate waste is higher. Like people are overdoing it because they're excited or they're trying things that they don't like. So one thing that some sites are doing in those all-you-care-to-eat settings is to be able to try to give tastes, so like tasting spoon options. So it's like, try it before you take a giant portion of it. And then there's some customization in those settings where you can have smaller serving utensils and smaller plates, but you can't make them too small, right? Because then people fight back and they're like, this plate's too small and I'm trying to pile it on. So I think that, the chef specials, what we found with the Purpose project where people were creating things from food that would otherwise be wasted, sometimes that was it's here until it's gone. Those type of things are successful too. And then that is something plated, but it's a taste, it's set up to be a taster, right? Like a tasting portion. And I think that that's a good way to meet that interest in something, lots of different options without creating it, like putting it on the line. And that's a way that they can gain input if something should be then on the menu regularly too.
That's great. And Brian, what are you seeing? I know you've talked to restaurateurs in Ohio. What are you seeing over there?
Yeah, we worked with the Ohio Restaurant Association, and about last fall we surveyed over 100 of their members, asked them what were they seeing in terms of changing and appetite of behavior among their patrons. Were they hearing about GLPs? And about 20% said they had received feedback from patrons about their GLP use and kind of how that was matching up with their experience in the restaurant. And about 40% said that they were attributing reductions in sales, alcohol, additional entree splitting requests to GLP usage. So they, small parts of this, they seem to be seeing some of the evidence in their doors. They weren't necessarily responding that much. I think the most active response was on portion size. So we had about 15% that said that they had already implemented some changes in portion size in response to this. But other things like highlighting menu options, advertising GLP-friendly items, things like that were much less likely to be kind of in consideration for them at this point.
Great. And I know that we've talked a lot about GLP-1s, but we also know food inflation is real. And I guess I just have a quick audience question. Do you think that food inflation is actually really changing consumers' actual food management practices right now? If you think yes, raise your hand. No judgment. Great. In general, it is. We are finding that. We're publishing, actually in June, some more information from consumer research that we did through YouGov. And we are seeing that there's a lot of trends that are natural when we think about inflation. There's things that you do. You naturally trade down. You use a store brand instead of a regular. You might not buy that extra splurge item that you used to have. But what we're actually seeing now is folks are saying they're eating their leftovers more often. They're bringing them home. They're looking and planning their shopping a little bit more carefully than they have historically. They're looking in the fridge and the freezer rather than going out and just ordering right away. So we know that food inflation, again, is that tailwind for us, and we're starting to see it really impact consumer behavior. Again, a huge opportunity for us.
Sarah, I'll jump in here because Ran Lee, who's in the room, and myself and Ronnie Neff and a few others have some studies of this as well, and we agree with that their intentions are there, but sometimes we're seeing some backfiring in terms of that because we were able to then ask them later on their actual waste, their self-reported waste. And so some of those tactics like trading down on quality, actually can backfire or buying in bulk is one way that they're trying to save money as well, of course. And so we do see that some of those are associated with higher self-reported waste as well. So there is some kind of give and take there that even though they're intending to do the right thing, they might not be sticking the landing in terms of being able to follow through on that intention and actually delivering that lower waste.
Yeah, the dreaded say-do gap, right? Like we all have the best intentions. But Brian, I think of those behaviors, are there any that are actually like sticky that we could get excited about, like that you think would stay when it comes to reacting to food prices?
Yeah, I think I think the shock of the new food prices will make them think more critically about how they're sourcing, and you know, going to DoorDash and ordering items, and all those soggy fries as they arrive might not be being eaten. It'll be interesting to see if they can kind of connect those dots and realize that not to order the fries on DoorDash, because by the time they get there, they might not be as tempting as they sounded on the menu.
I also think this is where it comes down to that value. We talked about at the beginning, price and value, and if there are options on menus, like out of the home, if there are options that the price tag is a better price too, right? And then they're like, I will choose that instead of a $20 plate of a share plate of like buffalo cauliflower. Like maybe you're one person, and so you're going to get a smaller portion, and then that $11 option is better for me too. It's better for my budget, and then I don't have that guilt of taking food home or not. So I think that that's also this opportunity here, is to like create menu options that are a bit more affordable, and doing that using portion options of popular items too, so that they can still eat out.
And if they found the hack during the high food price inflation and they ended up adding a device, using a device or using AI or using an app, that could be very sticky as well. All of a sudden, they are now in an app environment that allows them to be much more efficient, shop for deals, inventory management. So I think that would be one possibility for a sticky change that could persist beyond the current food price inflation spike.
I think a lot of these are also dovetailing to what the opportunity is for more plant-based foods because of the lower price that those can present. But also some of the barriers that we see to people wanting to transition to plant-based is that they're afraid of the taste. So if you're just doing a trial or you're doing a small bite, you get to taste it and actually realize it is delicious. So then you may be more likely to order that again in the future. And also that just that thought process around you're fearing that it's not going to fill you up. Well, if you're on a GLP-1 and your goal is no longer to fill yourself, then that can be another better option for you. And so as you're thinking about your health, and that plant-based opportunity, I think, opens up a little bit. It takes down some of those barriers that we've traditionally seen to transitioning to more plant-based meals. So I'm hopeful that may be one of the things that that grows alongside some of the other trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity there to dovetail, especially when you look at a lot of those trends, whether it's plant-based, whether it's climate positive type eating, or lower carbon. I do want to ask Jessica you one last question before we open it up for audience questions, which is, we've talked about all of these things, but we also know menu change is really hard. Anything that we should just be aware of in terms of like that operational barrier? I don't want to understate how difficult it is. Even you're like, how hard is it really to just offer a half portion of that? You just cut it in half, divide it by 2. I know that's oversimplifying. Like from the operator's perspective, how difficult is some of this work?
Yeah, I mean, every change, you have to go through the whole gamut of the training, the awareness, the buy-in. So regardless of what the type of change it is, you have to go through that process. But I think what's helpful here is that we are now connecting the dots between what's happening on the plate. So like we were talking about earlier, if you're actually seeing the plate waste, you can then understand that even though I made this great plate of food, people are only eating half of it. How do you make that change? And so I think that positive feedback will help with the operator's implementation of any of the new components that they want to do with their food service. But absolutely, it's not an easy thing. It takes ongoing training and retraining to make it stick. But I think because we have so many new variables at play, there's a lot more behind the why to make the change than if we were just coming with a single message of we need to reduce food waste. That's only going to impact a certain amount of the population. Now we have a lot more trends to lean on to say these are all headed in the same direction.
Yeah, I think that is a great place to turn over to audience questions on. Erica has a mic out in the audience so that we can get questions, and we'd love to hear from you all.
Hello. Here we go. Thank you so much. Jessica, I have a question for you. In our hotels work, we've seen this too, where you say, maybe we're going to give you a smaller portion to start, but come back and have as many servings as you want. Have you, in general, seen that well received? Or have people bristled at the fact, like you said, if you go too small with the plates, they start to push back? Like, how has that been received from an operational perspective?
Yeah, I think it can be positive, and it has been positive in certain situations. You know, it's so hard to generalize on the consumer, right? Because you know it's such a wide swath. But I think that's where that true hospitality and that spirit of service comes into play, where you might understand the type of eating that the consumer wants when they walk through the door, or hopefully they're a repeat customer, and so you know them a little bit better, and you know what type of intervention that's going to work well with them. But certainly the framing around, hey, let's start small and then come back, or let's have a taste. You want a trial sample? Everybody loves a free sample. You know, take a sample, and then if you like it, you can order the dish. You know, those are very effective ways to get people to not overcommit to something that at the end they didn't really enjoy, and then their experiences would have been worse.
If I can just add on that too, is the framing is right, because you don't want to call it like bottomless fries, right? Because then it's sort of like a challenge to eat tons of them or something. It's like a public health problem and a food waste problem. But I think that if you lean in from a hotel setting, especially into the hospitality of it, like we're happy to get you some more, right? Like just let us know, or however that works in that setting. I think that the positive framing of it is really important too. We've thought about this of like not calling it the lighter portion, you know, or something like that. We want to keep the framing, like have the lighter portion just be the regular, right? And then you can have a share size. So there's like language, and then I think the leading with hospitality is really nice.
So I work in a university setting, and we have a lot of chefs who are hired. And anytime I try to bring up these problems with them, the excuse from my directors are usually, well, they were just trained like this in culinary school. This is just how they are. They just want to make beef. They just want to make pork. Are you seeing like a shift? This is for Abby at the Culinary Institute, of students wanting to go towards more waste diets, to go towards more plant-forward diets, because I just keep hearing it, and I feel like education, when it starts from the top, and then I'm getting the chefs, would really help.
Yeah, great question. And some of the resources we have available too are for like industry kind of staff training as well too. So putting that out there as well. But I would say that, yeah, we hear a lot from the chef faculty that we work with on research that the students are very acutely aware of food waste in a like culinary education environment, where there are some things that's already built in and they're concerned about it. And that is different than it was a decade ago. And that they're already thinking about within the courses how to share waste. So some things I've heard from the baking faculty is that they take waste from other classes and actually weave it into the baking. So the students are learning about food waste prevention woven through the curriculum now, and especially folks that are in like applied food studies, that's a priority. I think that they see that it's a problem. And also then the food business students are also thinking about it from a resource efficiency and still wanting to figure out how to make money in an environment where it's increasingly expensive to operate a food business. And I think that the other thing there is like, yes, they're trained, but then they're gaining work experience on the job. And, you know, the people that see plates every day are the dishwashers. Like, you know, so there's a way where we can learn from staff and send them back to see like what's actually being wasted. And again, some of the staff training and empowerment is also a U.S. food waste pack project called FoodWise that's available on our MCRC site and probably on the food waste pack site as well, is one to, in stand-ups, just like food waste education and then some innovation challenges to really get them seeing themselves as change agents so that they can track food waste in their day-to-day. So that might be helpful too, to reframe, like, yes, they may have learned that back in the day. Culinary education is changing now, and on-the-job training, there are always opportunities.
we don't hear a lot about what's after GLP-1, like when they've achieved their goals. And what worries me a little bit is folks that are on these, my wife is, so I have some experience, they're in an aggressive deficit, but there's the what's next. And not a lot of coaching is happening around that and providing tools and resources. But just, I guess, for Brian, is there research coming up that's going to look into folks that have achieved goals and how are they doing? Are they on a maintenance dose? Are they,
Yeah, I was just at a convening of researchers on this in New Orleans early in April, and that's one of the frontiers of research right now. So there are medications specifically coming on the market for maintenance. There's also some studies suggesting that just going every other week on the medication for a weekly injection maintains quite nicely, and so that cuts costs in half and reduces invention need as well. And there's a lot of efforts here from kind of the obesity management community. The National Weight Loss Registry folks are very interested in understanding how to figure out the phenotypes of successful maintainers and how to provide support for them. But that's still early in its infancy. It's all been about all the investment, all the research has been about getting down that ladder, and they have been successful. Now it's like, crap, we've been that successful. How do we actually then we've caught the mail bus? What do we do now? And so that is the next frontier, and there's a lot of thought about that going on. I mean, there's 7 major pharmaceuticals that are going to have medications coming out over the next 5 years, probably 20 different, and that's other than Lilly and other than Novo. So 7 other major international pharmaceutical companies are going to have competing products, and so they're all going to be differentiating to try to solve some of these issues. I'm sorry.
I think it's one of the benefits of having all of these trends happening now, disrupting now, because if we have portion size options, that's great for everybody, right? Regardless of if you're on a GLP-1 or not, or you used to be and you're transitioning, because again, you still have that choice. And then hopefully this gives more of the healthiest option to whatever phase of life that you're in. You can choose better instead of only having the one size fits all trough in front of you. So I'm hopeful about this transition that's happening in the food system, because it's giving people more options to choose healthier for them, whatever that might mean, and that's going to change in the future too. But hopefully the way that we're serving food and the awareness that's building now with everybody around what they're eating, we're making it a little bit easier to make the right choice in the food system instead of relying on just the history that we've built up over time.
And I think that the one interesting point that I heard from Nielsen on consumers a few weeks ago, and work that they're doing in talking to consumers who are using GLP-1s, is they're actually finding that those who are users of GLP-1s are actually having a slight shift in identity. Like, they are having a different sense of self and who they are, and some of their values around food and how they value the quality of food that they're using. And I think the question is how sticky is that identity over time? Because a lot of that identity will certainly drive their behavior. And so I think it's really interesting that they're starting to find the GLP-1 users are actually defining themselves differently than they did in the past. And it's not about weight, it's not about health, it's about, I'm a person who eats great foods, and this is why, and it is their new identity. And so I think there's something super interesting in that might have a tail that carries on.
My question's for Jessica. It's about messaging, and I'm curious about what messaging you're finding is most effective in communicating with frontline teams about why reducing food waste is important. Is it a business driver? Is it good for the environment? Is it good for user experience? Maybe it's a little bit of all, but if you had to tier the messaging, which I'm sure you do already internally, but yeah, I'm curious if you can just give us a glimpse. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it is all of the above, because everybody's coming at it from a different standpoint. But I would say the top 2 messages that resonate the most are that it's a reduction in cost, because that's aligns with all their other priorities that they have in the business as well. But that reduction in cost is also a good message for their clients that they're servicing. And it gives them an opportunity to then do something different with the food that they're serving. So, we talked a lot about how do you shift to higher quality, smaller portion food. That's great for chefs. They would love to cook better quality food in smaller portions. So if you're wasting less food, that gives you that opportunity. So, the messages are a bit combined there. But the second most effective message is when you connect that reduction of food waste to actually feeding more people. A lot of frontline food service workers are also the people who are hungry. And so they understand and completely recognize and identify with this idea of throwing away food is not a good idea. So, that message always resonates, and that sticks with people in terms of, hey, if we can help reduce the food waste, we're also making our food system more efficient and feeding more people.
I think we have time for one more question.
Do we have data on whether people on GLP-1s are reducing or improving the quality of their diet or just reducing the amount? Because you could imagine they say, well, I'm GLP-1, so that's going to satisfy my health needs, so I'll just kind of eat less, but not necessarily better quality.
Yeah, the initial data suggests that dietary quality is improving among GLP users, both in their self-reported consumption and then in the analysis of their purchase receipts. There tends to be an decrease overall in purchasing, particularly among more processed items, among fries and starches and meat to some extent, although that the verdict is still out on that. Meat snacks seem to go up, so a lot more jerky being purchased. But fresh fruit and vegetables seems to hold steady in terms of purchases and go up in terms of self-reported consumption. Yogurt and things like that also stay stable or are being reported as higher, and less alcohol consumption as well, which is for restaurateurs is a big issue because that's such a high margin item. It really hurts restaurateurs, and so there's a lot of innovation going on in the mocktail side of things to try to make sure that they can still price in those and get that part of the menu back into their profit streams.
Great.
I've also read about mini martinis that you can now purchase. So, little mini martinis. All right.
Is that what we had before?
No. And with that, I just want to give you each the last word. This is an interesting opportunity, an interesting moment with all these headwinds. Any last words you would want to leave everyone with about the opportunity?
I just say GLPs they're like I say, multiple major international pharmaceuticals. 20 plus formulations in the FDA approval pipeline between now and 2030. It's coming, competition is going to be high, differentiation of products is going to be high. So this is not a trend, this is going to be around. Although we still have not seen, there still may be a decadal long review of some of this, and there might be a really negative shoe to drop. And so there could be, an issue that still has not emerged that could be damaging to this. But if that doesn't emerge over, say, the next probably 3 to 4 years, then I think this is going to be a major trend that we all have to confront.
And I would just lean into culinary creativity. I think you can't go wrong when you're giving chefs another opportunity to rethink what they're serving in a higher quality way. I mean, that's I think the best kind of food service you can have, and I think this opens the door to do that. So I think it's a welcome disruption that hopefully will have a lasting impact.
Yeah, I would build on that and just say, from a culinary creativity standpoint, building something that's small and spectacular is excellent. You don't have to maybe think of it like building a whole composed meal as much as separate components that will still be a delightful experience. GLP-1 users are still going to want to go out to eat, have delicious experiences, have that social shared meal time. So thinking of ways that we can appeal to that while also appealing to younger generations that want to eat and try a lot of small and spectacular things. So
And I will just end with, I think we've been talking all about this, although we haven't named it, but it's about the triple bottom line. It's about helping consumers. There's a demand for this. It's something that's interesting and exciting to them. There's an opportunity to serve them better. We can improve business margins, frequency, and so many other metrics there. And we can't negate the fact that there's a huge opportunity, 2.3 million pounds of food waste that we could reduce by offering choice and something that actually could be, from a culinary perspective, exciting for guests. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you all. Yep.